Hi, everybody. I'm here today with my friend and colleague, Perry Lovelace. He and I have collaborated for over a quarter of a century. He is just one of the best guys I know for doing what we're talking about today, which is managing maintenance backlogs. Perry has helped organizations in various industry verticals improve their maintenance management processes and has trained people around the world. Over the years, you and I have discussed managing maintenance backlogs, Perry. And I thought we'd talk about today, and I want to start by talking about one of the issues I'm most familiar with, which is going to places, and the people may know how many work orders they have in the backlog, but they got no idea how much work is in the backlog. And as we know, doing the maintenance job is about getting work done and the amount of effort it takes to get that work done. So let's talk about that issue, and then maybe you can talk about some other issues you've seen in the field, and we'll talk about those together and see what we come up with for this video.
Sounds like a plan, Bill. Well, thank you very much, Bill. I appreciate being here with you. I mean, we've collaborated, like you say, on many different projects, and it's always a joy to combine our different experiences and to help our clients.
Perry, what about this first thing that I talked about, the not knowing how many hours are actually in the backlog?
Oh, that's just a big one. But almost every organization, whatever the industry is, always uses backlog as a common word. And it has so many different ways to look at it, from KPIs, from amount of work, or from the number of work orders. And what I found is very difficult. But the first thing you need to do is start defining what you're talking about with backlog, and then you define the units of measure. And as you point out so well, it's not just, well, the number of work orders is one way to measure it, but if you want to know how much work there is, you've got to have your wrench time estimates on the work orders so you can totalize them in the schedule.
Right.
And when we talk about, if we want to go off on a tangent here a little bit, when we talk about wrench time on a work order, it's a common question out there for planners, and that is, what do you do about travel time? And many industries, offshore industries and other multiple location industries, have a significant amount of travel time. And I'm of the mind that the planner just needs to operate and estimate wrench time, and let the travel time be a way of compiling the work orders to send a crew out to do a job.
Okay. Well, my opinion is that travel time has a severe impact on how much time they're actually going to get to spend on their wrenches. I look at it like, if you're in a plant, it's a very limited range of motion, just a little bit of travel time, and you may not need to have jobs as well planned as you would for somebody who has to drive 40 miles to go do the job at a pumping station, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, because if the guy at the pumping station gets out there and he doesn't have the right wrench or he doesn't have the right part, he's not doing any more work.
That may be often is a big contributor to work
Right,
that doesn't get done because it's inadequately planned.
right. And one of the best ways I know of measuring wrench time is not to measure the wrench time.
There you go.
The best way to measure the wrench time is to measure all those things that get in the way of having good wrench time. How much are you delayed for getting to where you need to go? How much are you delayed for the equipment not being available to you? Uh,
Big deal.
how many times do you have to go back to the storeroom to get something that was
Yep.
forgotten on the work order, or because the work order wasn't well planned? So that wrench time, or efficiency, whatever you want to call it, can have a major impact on how big your backlog really is. Because
Totally.
if you're not really accounting for the wrench time, and you put that schedule out there and they can't possibly do the schedule because they just aren't efficient enough to get it done, then you got an issue. and your backlog will grow. I mean, I've
Oh,
seen that happen.
absolutely. Yeah, wrench time is sometimes as low as 20% of the total paid time we pay for our people.
Right,
And so that just emphasizes the need for the planning process to be real clear on what it's estimating and how the planners put together a job package that actually can be done before
right.
they release it to the schedule.
Yeah, and even best practice somewhere between 55 and 65%.
That'd be
So
great.
that if you could get 55 to 65% wrench time, you're doing pretty well.
Oh, that's
But
outstanding. That's
yeah,
would be best practice.
right.
Yeah. But the
So
problem, to go back to that issue, Bill, one of the problems occurs in planning, and that is they don't. There's not a clear definition of what they're estimating when it says hours to perform
right,
on the work order in whatever various ways that is. And the one way to get, and we talked about this, the more accurate hours to perform is to use a job plan library and look at other jobs of similar type and then copy, paste, edit to get your averaging of wrench time.
right. And one of the things that really needs to happen too is that when the planner receives that work request and it's been approved to be worked, then when he turns that into a work order, he needs to put an estimate on there. As
Yep.
you said, he either pulls up a previous job that was the same job or goes to the job plan library or just puts a quick estimate on it. But that initial thing is they've got to get at least an order of magnitude estimate so that for scheduling purposes, you know how big that backlog is and for determining manpower needs and lots of other things. And we're going to talk here in a little bit about, okay, my backlog ought to be about 4 to 6 weeks, as was discussed in the previous video. What happens when that backlog creeps up on me? What do I need to do to help me reduce that backlog and not have it be chronically large, which means that people are going to start changing the way they put in their work request, right? If that
Yep.
backlog grows to 6 months, then what's going to happen with your work order system? Every job is going to come in as a high priority job. And when
Yep.
every job becomes a high priority job, then no job is a high priority job.
Then you're back into urgent management.
Right. So, Perry, what are some of the ways you've seen in the past for people to get those backlogs down once they get up there?
Well, first we got to be able to sort the backlog. And well, what do you sort it on? Well, there are various parameters there. You see, you can sort it on. You can do an aging report on how many work orders have aged beyond their completion, their estimated completion date is one way to do it. Another way to do it is to sort it based on equipment criticality. Another way to sort it is based on the work type, for instance, PMs versus corrective jobs or what have you. So to be able to sort your backlogs will emerge, and then you can apply, as you have in one of your slides, Bill, you can apply then a priority scheme as to how to make the decision of which work gets done and which work do we need to get done, but we need to hire people, we need to authorize overtime, we need to keep these crews on the weekend, or we need to bring a contractor in to handle a bunch of jobs, like you have a bunch of painting jobs or
Right.
lamping jobs. Just
Right.
bundle those together and get them done and get them off the backlog. But
So,
4 to 6 weeks, I think, is perfectly is good best practice. It's your schedule. You look at your schedule today, and it should be able to look out. You should have scheduled jobs looking out a month or a month and a half ahead of you, so
right,
that you can begin to see ahead. Like I call it schedule radar. How far is your schedule looking ahead for you? Now
right,
you can sort that to see what's not getting done.
right. And I think that's really good stuff for us to talk about in another video on scheduling,
Yeah.
right? Because uh, building that maintenance schedule and making sure you've got enough lead time for the jobs on it and making sure that you've got a schedule that everybody believes in when you get to the week of doing the work is extremely important to controlling your backlog.
That's
So,
right.
very important point there. Um, I'm
Well,
curious. Let's say we get a temporary situation, so we bring some people in on overtime, or we hire a contractor to do a big wad of work that came up because there was some special initiative that took place in the plant or in the facility. Uh, that's those are temporary things, and we can handle those using contractors and that sort of thing. But what about if we get into a situation where we've got chronically large backlog? What do you think we ought to do?
well, maybe you don't have enough people to handle the
Oh yeah,
workload you have,
yeah. And that
and
brings us
so
back to that. That brings us back to that crew efficiency or wrench time situation
exactly.
as well. Yeah,
Precisely. So if you're going to argue for more FTEs or the more mechanics or electricians or wherever your main need is in creating the backlog, then you're going to have your backlog well defined, because when you go to the budgeting process and ask for another 3 or 4 mechanics or whatever it is you're asking about, you're going to have to defend that against the accounting department. So your
right,
backlog has really got to be buttoned down and defendable.
right. And
Yep.
when I've had
Another.
those conversations in the past, one of the first questions I'm always asking: Are you sure you're using your people right?
Well, exactly. So you better know
So
what the
you need
efficiency is.
right. You need to
Uh,
know what your wrench time is, know what your planning horizon is, know all of those things when you go to justify those additional people that you might need.
exactly, because your good accounting department is going to poke holes all in it, and that's what you want them to do. But you want to be
Right.
prepared with a good, well managed backlog knowledge,
Right.
and your processes to develop that backlog well in place. And
Yeah.
that's world class behavior. You and I have
Oh
both
yeah.
been in plants and organizations that do that. I mean, that's not
Right.
in the sky here. We're talking
Yeah.
about something that's already been done. We don't have to reinvent the wheel.
One of the things I've seen happen is equipment gets added, but no people get added. Right.
Oh,
So
construction.
so
Oh,
we,
yeah.
we increase the workload without increasing the workers. So and expect to get the same results we've been getting, and that's not good. So if you are working in a facility and you are expecting an expansion or some equipment to be added, you need to take a good, strong look at the workforce there and make sure that for the anticipated preventive maintenance and predictive maintenance and corrective maintenance that's going to take place on that new equipment, you have enough people.
I agree with you, Bill. I've run across that so many times. I was working with one university campus, and they were going to build a new building. And all the architects, they were real excited about the new chemistry building and so blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
And then I asked him, I said, well, how many more maintenance people? Chemistry building's fairly important with all the HVAC, the duct
Right.
work, all that stuff, and piping. I said, how many more maintenance people are you going to need to take care of that building? And they
Yeah.
thought, oh, no, we can do it with our existing staff. Well, stop. And so they finally
Right.
built in another 2 people to take care of that new building. And that's
Right.
very common,
Oh
very
yeah.
common.
So yeah, what you're saying when you're going to do it with your existing staff is that, well, those guys must be standing around a good part of the day. We'll give them some more
That's why
work to
you got
do.
to know that's why you got to know your work ridge time efficiency.
Right.
And if they're
Absolutely.
doing half, that's good. If you're
Yeah.
getting half the hours of ridge time out of a full day's pay, that's darn good.
Oh yeah. That's really good.
Now, let me just add to that while we're talking about how do you deal with shortening a backlog? How do you deal with an enlarging backlog?
Right.
Um, and at some point, there are there are seasonal issues as well, which come into play in many industries, particularly industries in wet, dry areas or industries in cold, hot environments. And that is, can you move a bunch of work to be done in the off season, like
Right.
you're changing your pipe structures that froze up all last winter, can you move that to the off season? That's another way to cluster a bunch of work to get a bunch off the backlog.
Right.
That caused, I know, in one case in the oil field, they had, I don't know, 2,600 wells or something, and they had a big freeze, and all of a sudden the pipes into the tanks had lots and lots of freezes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not new. They've been dealing with this urgency
Yeah.
for years, but then they put together a big chunk of work to go out and reslope those pipes
Right.
during summer season, and they got that done over the period. And so the next winter they offset their the freezing.
So they lowered the amount of emergency work they were going to be doing the next year.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
because the emergency work created a lot of work, the schedule that didn't get done,
Right.
and it caused a lump in the backlog, peak of
Right.
backlog items that didn't get done. So that was the way they assessed that,
Yeah.
was that the urgency was caused by an unusual weather pattern.
And I think that seasonal thing is important because when we're talking about the scheduling bit, we can talk about leveling that schedule out and, and being prepared for the seasonal change. As you're headed into winter, there's a bunch of work that has to be done in certain places to get prepared for winter. And that like puts a peak in your workload to
Another way
do
to look at a backlog that's increasing is that in plants where you have scheduled shutdowns or
yeah,
turnarounds, can you move a lump of work that, even if it doesn't require a shutdown, into piggyback onto the construction work that's done during the shutdown?
yeah,
So there's another way to kind of move some work over to that scheduled period.
yeah.
We talked about this earlier, and that is shutdown work has to be operated in a totally separate system.
Yeah, and that's
Scheduled.
actually brings about what I was going to talk about a few minutes ago. Was I forgot to mention what we were really talking about here was the running backlog. I did want to mention that when we're talking about the backlog, what we're really talking about is the running backlog. When we say 4 to 6 weeks backlog, we're talking the running backlog. Shutdown backlogs are totally different, or handled a totally different way. In many places, handled by a totally different crew of people. The shutdown backlog is handled by the shutdown planners, not necessarily by your day-to-day planning function.
Right.
In fact, best practice is move that away from day-to-day planning if you can.
Absolutely.
So 4 to 6 weeks, we talked about if you've got a chronically large backlog, we're talking about justifying people to get that done. We've talked about if you get a lump of backlog, you can use contractors or try to figure a way to get that work done in some other ways. What are some of those other ways that those sudden large uh, spurts in backlog can be handled?
Well, you've got to take care of your critical equipment first.
Right.
And so any of the work orders that are now not being done and that are in your backlog, even scheduled in your backlog, they've got to be addressed. And you have to be able to identify those, because critical equipment drives the process. And part of that, of course, are the PMs that are due on that critical equipment. And so being able to sort and manage and discuss the backlog within the maintenance organization, within the operations organization, and reliability engineering organization is very important to have discussable, defendable, running backlog issues. The other piece I would like to bring up, Bill, and that is you don't have to deal with all the backlog at once.
Right.
Dealing with a running backlog is an annual process, and we want to look at how are we doing. And if it becomes critical in that your number of failures, unexpected failures, are going up because you're not attending to the work, then you've got to do something fairly drastic fairly early on
Right.
getting those work orders done.
Right. Especially the PMs and the corrective maintenance that's arisen from your condition monitoring program.
especially.
You know, one of the things about condition monitoring is it can't be effective if you can't get the corrective maintenance done that's specified by the condition monitoring task. So that's an important thing. Those PMs and the corrective maintenance from your condition monitoring are extremely important, and they should get the highest priorities in your system, especially
Exactly.
on the very critical equipment.
And we have to have a way when we sort, whether we use an Excel sorting process or
Right.
what have you, we have to be able to allow those critical condition based PMs to float to the top so we can
Right.
identify them and then get them on the schedule and get them back into that
Right.
running process.
Exactly.
But again, managing the backlog is an ongoing
Absolutely.
dynamic, and it's not something that we need to knee jerk to react to in most cases,
Right.
unless you have a big fire or something of that nature.
Yeah,
Uh,
there are things that are going to happen, but
Catastrophic things that
right.
happen that blow your schedule. You know,
Right.
one way you do that I've discovered in backlogs is that when you have an unexpected catastrophic or semi-catastrophic event, and you get all of a sudden your schedule stops, and you now have to restart it. Um, how resilient is
Mm-hmm.
your your schedule and backlog to get back up, right the ship, and get back on that schedule? And how long does that take? That requires what we're talking about, and that is a really good handle on the amount of manpower, the
Right.
ability to prioritize work on critical equipment, and so on and so forth. So
Yeah.
it comes into handy when you do have a catastrophic event.
Absolutely. And I know one of the things when I was maintenance manager, one of the things we did was at least once a month we would review the backlog in our weekly scheduling meeting, and if there was work on there that seemed like it had been sitting there too long and wasn't getting done, that's when we would talk about just taking it out of the system. You know,
Right.
if a job's been there for 6 months, it's probably never going to get done.
Exactly
And
right.
that's when you go to the people that requested it and said, do you really want this work done? If you want it done, do we need to jack up the priority somehow? Right. So you've got to have cooperative scheduling going on. You've got to have lots of good communication among maintenance, operations, engineering, and if you got a central shops, and when you're building that maintenance schedule, you've got to have some communication with HR. You know, you got to know what vacation schedules are, what holidays are scheduled. Are there any special trainings that are going to go on that are going to impact who's available to you to get the work done? And that all requires good, strong communication among all the groups. So this siloed approach to running a business doesn't really work very well when it comes to managing maintenance work and making sure that the schedules are good.
Exactly. You know, on that same line, Bill, I went into a plant. I was called in. One of their alarm factors that called me in as a consultant, planning and scheduling consultant, was we've got over 3,000 work orders in our backlog.
Hmm.
What are we going to do about that? And so we looked at it. We said, well, you know, where are they? Well, they happen to be in a CMMS file. And I said, okay. I talked to the planner person, and I said, run me a report on the estimated completion date for these work orders. And so they sorted the 3,000 based on estimated completion date, and we found that over 1,500 of them were over a year old.
Yeah.
And so the first thing we did was that you point out, let's see if we really want to do these. So that and the other one was duplicates.
Yep.
So we actually started sorting what we thought was the backlog, what they thought was the backlog. We really came down to about 700
Yeah.
real viable work orders that need to be dealt with. So
Right.
um, and then we started doing, as you point out, we started putting an evaluation system based on priority, based on critical equipment and availability of
Right.
manpower. Then they decided that actually our work order efficiency needs to be improved, our wrench time
Or wrench
efficiency.
time. Yeah.
We spend too
Yeah.
much time traveling.
Right. You know, a lot of that travel time you see is
That.
because people don't have stuff when they get out to do the job, so they have to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and just like, for gosh sakes, if it's a well planned job, they're not going to have to do that. All
And
right. Well,
the back and forth part, when we don't have the right tools or equipment or permissions when we get out to the job, uh, is found on the completion process of the work order and the input that comes back from the field from the technician on what happened that wasn't right when they
right.
got out. And
Right.
that becomes now a history mining effort to find out why it was that this set of jobs, did not have the right tools, or was it we got onto the schedule without the right available
Right.
parts and materials, so on and so forth. So the completion process of the work order is essential to put back into the system so that we can determine these uh, uh,
Right.
inadequately planned jobs.
Right. And a KPI of estimated completion time versus actual completion time can help with that. Uh,
Surely can.
if it goes more than 20% past the estimated time, then it needs to have some causal analysis done to help figure out, well, what caused it to go over time, right? Was it the plan? Was it the equipment not being available? Was it any number of things can come
And
up? There's plenty of issues that can cause you to go long. And that's one of the reasons that best practice on uh, planning time or plan time for a job is plus or minus 20%. I mean, if you narrowed that down too narrow to start with, you're going to be looking at almost every job you do, because the job's planned by a human. And I can promise you, having worked on equipment myself, right, is you go out there one time and it takes you an hour to do this job, right? The next time you go out, there's one bolt that's frozen and gets wrung off, and that hour becomes 4 hours
yep.
easily, because then you have to stop the work. You have to get this whatever tool you need in order to get that bolt out. You may have to get a welder brought out so you can weld something onto the part that's in there. You've got to find a way to loosen that thing up. So those times are going to vary, but in general, if the planner is within 20% plus or minus on the time estimated, that's good enough for your day-to-day planning and scheduling purposes.
Absolutely, and
Uh,
that's a
uh,
standard best
right,
practice, plus or minus 20% on the estimate of
right,
wrench time.
right. Now, a hugely complex job with a lot of people on it, you've got to spend more effort making sure that that job plan is more accurate. Because,
And those huge jobs are most likely going to be done during shutdown anyway.
right, they're going to be done on a shutdown, and a lot of planning is going to go into that job.
Right.
All right, well, Perry, thanks a lot. I think we had a pretty good discussion here. We kind of went off in some directions occasionally, but I think we've got some seeds for further discussion in the future, especially about how to schedule jobs and how to make sure that schedule is as accurate can be, and when you might break that schedule. So thanks a lot. I've enjoyed today's conversation. I hope the people we see in the future enjoy it too.
Great, Bill. Thank you. It's really a pleasure. I always love these as well. And I hope that the people who watch this video will be able to reply with questions so that we can respond to them.
Right.
Pleasure,
Great.
Bill. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Perry. Enjoyed it.